Thank you for joining us here on Vital for Colorado Radio, part of the Connect and Collaborate Network. I am your on-air producer, Jon Ekstrom, joined as always by our chairman and CEO, Peter Moore.
Thanks, John. It's always a pleasure. It's a high point in my month to be able to spend time doing this a couple times, meet so many interesting people. And today we have one of the more prominent people in the whole Denver metro area. Very, very happy to introduce Katie Kruger, who's the CEO of the Denver Metro Commercial Association of Realtors. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
I'd like to know a little bit about your background, but before we do, I've always wondered how to pronounce the acronym for your organization. I sort of come up with DEMCAR.
That's right, DEMCAR. That's DEMCAR? How we say it.
DEMCAR, okay.
And it's a pervasive sort of slang acronym that we use. Our National Association of Realtors we call NAR, which is incorrect, but that's what, and then CAR, the Colorado Association, and so it's just a trickle down of that. So
man, NAR, that sounds like we're snowboarding or something. Like,
I know.
Get some of that NAR pow.
They don't sound nearly as serious as they are at the lobbying level.
No, they are quite serious.
Yeah.
But what a funny acronym.
So just tell us a little bit about DEMCAR, because it's a very, very significant organization. It kind of is a precursor for a lot of what we're going to talk about today to understand the interests that you represent. Sure.
In the state of Colorado, there are roughly, if you go to DORA's Real Estate Commission, they'll say there's 30-some thousand licensed real estate brokers in Colorado. We know that there's 25,000 that are active. 2,000 of those are commercial real estate brokers, and we represent those brokers and some owners across the state of Colorado. It's a $12.6 billion industry. If people have been following the success of the commercial real estate industry over the years, it's really grown. It's a major industry in Colorado.
Well, what's interesting is my wife was a residential realtor for a while and was recruited away by a commercial real estate firm and now has switched her license from residential to commercial and is doing commercial property management now.
It's a big business. Growth in almost every sector.
Certainly.
I've been a commercial lawyer in Denver since '81, and our law firm is really strong in terms of commercial real estate, and I've just met so many interesting characters in the last, I don't want to even count the years, but very, very impactful for the urban core for Denver, the state of Colorado, and especially right now. I mean, right now is the high time, and people are thinking that the economy might go up or down, and I think the more think about the the stock market and things like that, but not commercial real estate. I'd say it's boom times right now, as far as I can see.
We're very optimistic in our business that the good times will keep going for quite a while.
And so all the people in Colorado are really fortunate, because that's one of the major drivers of the economic and GDP for the state. And some people say that we have the best economy in the country, and I know we're kind of trading accolades with Austin, perhaps, but that's pretty good to live in the best economy in the country, and I think that's roughly true right now.
It's true, and we like to think of ourselves as we're really burgeoning on becoming a Tier 1 international city here in Denver, and within the commercial markets, we've seen the industrial segment really take off.
Right.
It's leading. We're ideally situated as the United States as a whole, as consumers change from buying things in the retail manner to having things shipped to their homes. So this distribution aspect.
Certainly. Why would a corporation or why would your members join DEMCAR? What types of things do you do? What types of issues do you advocate on? What is sort of the sales pitch for DEMCAR?
Sure. We provide commercial real estate property data, which is really very critical to all the small and large firms alike. We do a ton of business development and business promotion, which, a lot of that amounts to unique relationships with the Denver Business Journal at large, celebrations and award ceremonies at places like the Four Seasons. And then probably probably the most important, we do a ton of advocacy work and public policy work for the industry. From big things like the broker lien law that allows brokers to lien a property and make sure they get paid, to smaller things at the Real Estate Commission, for example, when letters of intent might be at risk for use. So, and then this year, as we're going to get into a number of very critical issues, we don't stick to just the commercial real estate industry. Our business is economic development minded, and we don't think in silos. We believe in keeping all industry healthy to keep us healthy.
Well, I mean, that makes sense because the way other industries go, I mean, they need office space, they need commercial properties, they need perhaps retail locations. And if any given industry is not doing well or is faced with some sort of regulatory setback, that's going to trickle down to your business as well. Is that fair to say?
That's correct. We see it every time.
Is that true of, how does Denver compare in terms of the advocacy that you do here versus other cities? Are you more robust? Are you about average? How much are you coordinating with other regions or other cities?
You know, ours is the most robust in Denver. We are the largest commercial real estate organization of our kind in the country. So it's great that we have the ear of our state association and even our national lobbyists, and we have the ability to draw down on support from other cities and from DC when it comes to advocacy issues where we need additional support. By and large, the CEOs, my colleagues, call us and say, how did you navigate this? And as you know, sometimes they can't replicate such things in other markets. We've got 2 U.S. senators from the 2 different parties that get along and are generally very productive. Colorado's unique. We're trying to hang on to that uniqueness.
Certainly. So I guess my question to you is, what led you to this line of work? Because you got into this at a fairly young age. I mean, very young CEO. What compelled you to get into this space?
That's a great question. I had to think about that. I haven't been asked that before.
Never?
Not yet. This is a first. My skill set was very strong in management and association management at a young age. I was involved in public policy from a communications standpoint. Becoming CEO, I was able to restructure our organization so that it was sort of set up to be a springboard for growth, and we did. We grew some 40%, 44% or something within the first 3 or 4 years. The company was running great, and we were missing this legacy piece. Public policy is one of the most important things that you can do for business. It's your lasting legacy. It impacts the most people. It impacts the bottom line of our brokers and owners that are in the business every day. It's in my opinion, it's highly rewarding for our leadership to get involved and see that they can make a personal difference. It was a natural progression of the growth of an association that had grown in volume to that size. So public policy really has kind of taken off for our group over the last 5 years.
Wow. That's remarkable growth. You said you started, so how long have you been CEO?
I think I'm getting into my am I starting my 7th year, 6 or 7 years?
Wow.
Now? Yeah.
And you said you started on the comm side.
I did.
And so what was that like? I'm also a communications professional. I started working for a trade association. I worked for Colorado Oil and Gas Association, and then I worked for a PR agency. So I wasn't doing publicity. I wasn't doing, that type of thing. I wasn't doing spin necessarily. It was more policy focused. Is that sort of what you came out of as well?
It's true. That's how the communications began to be angled. As I was a VP and before I became CEO, in those roles you do a tremendous amount of listening, and you have to be very careful about the exposure you give your leadership to different policy things that we're working on. A good example of that is we go back in time and think about the broker lien law. Some of our building owners were reluctant to be the sort of mouthpiece for an issue that would be directly kind of butting up against their clients. And so figuring out how to listen to both sides and bring together a big enough group and really get it right. Lots of early communication before more public communication. There's the crisis management side that ends up being a really great skill set to have when you get deeper into policy stuff. So I think it was a really natural and effective springboard for being a CEO where you're on the spot a lot.
Yeah.
It's kind of a perfect setup, really, to first talk about how important commercial real estate is to the economy for all of Colorado. Then to talk about the strength of the organization has become a leader in the country, and then as a result of that, I guess realization that public policy issues and advocacy in public policy issues is almost one of the most important elements And here we are in probably one of the most momentous years. There are so many issues that are facing us, and ballots are about to drop, I think, the latter part of this week.
That's
and
right.
the consequences are significant in so many different areas. So that's the setup that I saw, is that that's a great person to talk about these issues
Yes.
from the point of view of commercial real estate, and really talk about the impact on the people that are involved and what the consequences might be for all other businesses.
Sure.
Well, absolutely. What you described is being very nimble, being very quick on your feet. And as we were talking about doing this show, you provided me a number of issues in which you are neck deep in.
That's
and
right.
they are quite varied.
Yes.
I mean, they really run the gamut here, and we're going to get into a number of them here. So one of the things that I think we should start on is Amendment 73. You are the chair of the No on Amendment 73 campaign, but before we get into the advocacy side of it, can you describe for us what Amendment 73 would do?
Yes, Amendment 73 is a $1.6 billion tax increase. The money would be allocated towards education. That money is made up of through a 78% tax increase on small businesses. These are S corps, LLCs, sole proprietors. There's also a component of business tax increase for C corps. So our big businesses are hit with a 30% tax increase. This proposal does away with our flat 4.62% income tax and replaces it with a tiered income tax that hits families, joint filers of $150,000 or more, all the way up to the top tier are filers of $500,000 or more, and they, at the top they're hit with an 80% increase. These,
Yikes.
These are really big numbers. When you're looking at the business tax increases, it shows that it would make us the least competitive in the Rocky Mountain West. When you're looking at these personal income tax increases, it would put us on par with New York and Vermont. There are also, just to continue to define it a little bit, there is a property tax increase component that nails Gallagher. It really starts to further complicate the Gallagher piece.
Wow.
Just remember the 78%, you're talking about small business and LLCs, limited liability companies, and perhaps S corporations. I'm not sure that people really appreciate that of all businesses in the whole country, I don't know about Colorado, but the numbers I'm thinking about are nationwide. I believe the small businesses constitute about 75% of the economy of the United States of America, and has to be something close to that in Colorado. So when you're talking about small businesses, it's the core of the Colorado economy.
That's
and
right.
Sometimes people think, well, LLCs, I don't know what those are.
Right.
I don't have one, or S corporations, or but just sort of get away from that jargon and just think about the idea that people organize as small businesses, and a 78% tax increase on their backs. And what is that going to do to this economy? I mean, it's shocking.
It's shocking.
I mean, it's just, 4 or 5% in an economy, you might be able to see something like that, but 78%, that's a wild number.
Well, and to put a personal spin on this, I am the owner of an S Corp. And so me personally thinking about what that would do to my bottom line, it almost makes it impossible for me to stay in business in that way.
That's right. These are numbers that our small businesses can't pass on in their entirety onto their consumers, onto their clients and customer base. These are big numbers. These numbers close businesses.
Yeah. So what are you doing as chair of this campaign? What types of things are you involved in terms of ensuring that people know the impacts of what this would be? One thing you also noted to me is written into this, there are no spending parameters or student outcome accountability in terms of this. And I think that's something that people should be aware of. If this were tied to some sort of measurable deliverable, that might change the calculus a little bit, but you tell me that there is no accountability in that way.
That's right, and I should add, I'm a co-chair, so I'm not the sole
Who's your
ringleader.
other co-chair?
Dave Davia and
Okay.
Luke Ragland. Very happy to be with these guys and getting through this. That's right. There's no spending parameters, so there's no way. And let me back up and say, most of the organizations in the broad coalition have supported education funding in the past in different manners. What we want to see is the bill be, the proposal be finished, and this looks unfinished without any spending parameters, no way to put this money in and see it gets to the teacher, see it gets to the kids, no student outcome measuring tools. And we've seen over the years from 1992 to 2014, education spending has gone up 15%. Teacher pay has gone down 11%. There are big issues with the system that need to be corrected before we pour money in. And that's really one of the big talking points that we have, is to remember we're for education funding. This needs to be done right. We pour this money in now. What are the chances of going back to the voters and getting more? One of the issues with Gallagher, the residential assessment rate ratchets down over time, right? Our assessment rates for homeowners get smaller and smaller at each cycle. This proposal locks in the education revenue portion at 7%. Now, if they're locking in their piece of the pie permanently, in perpetuity, what happens to fire, libraries, schools, parks, all these other municipal needs? They get squeezed down. And a lot of the studies show that if we don't correct Gallagher, which that's another topic for later on, it actually ratchets all the way down to zero.
Yikes.
We sort of got into this problem, and you're right, Amendment Tabor, Gallagher, Amendment 23, this so-called Gordian knot that people talk about, but it started with the idea of sort of replacing the ideas that legislatures will legislate and will put fixed formulas based upon false assumptions that radically turn out to be not true. And as it relates to commercial real estate, I think it's 29-something%. But that number has gone up and up and up, and it's become a very, very high number. And as a result, the percentage for homes has gone down. And as a result of that, the price of homes has gone up. And as a result of that, people can't afford homes anymore, and the entry level for homes is shocking. And all this started because some people said, I know what we'll do. We'll put fixed formulas in based upon assumptions, and it's forever.
Right.
That's right.
And I don't like this simply because it's another fixed formula that's going to have a lot of unintended consequences that people haven't even thought about.
Right.
I agree with you, Peter. One of the things that we hear from our retail segment of our markets is that if we don't fix Gallagher, it could create a sterilization of the retail market. This will be a direct impact of the Colorado lifestyle, and this happens because in the commercial sector, times are good, but our valuations are increasing anywhere from 50% to 150% at each cycle, and they're hitting that 29% assessment rate. And national credit is very active in the commercial market. These are your Good Times, your McDonald's, your Starbucks. But what about, your Denver Cobbler and your La Lomas and these guys that are not diversified over different markets? These are the businesses that we hear from our client or from our brokers that their clients are not going to be able to survive another cycle of valuation increases at these levels. And they've already endured two. They're under duress. When we go out on the weekends, when we have our families come into town, we go out and we use these retail environments. This is the Colorado lifestyle, and we really think that it's in jeopardy. So we're really looking forward to seeing what the interim study committee of the legislators have put together. They put together 5 proposed bills to potentially amend Gallagher. They're in draft form. Will be heavily involved in those discussions.
Wow. So to put a button on this, who else is against Amendment 73? Who has joined you in opposition? What types of organizations?
Yes, it's a very broad group. We've got some education groups. We've got
Really?
We do.
That's surprising.
It is surprising. These groups have spent decades dissecting the data and seeing how the money flows in and doesn't make it to the teachers, and they've studied things like charter schools and seen how sort of different regulations have allowed kids to have better outcomes. They've watched things like rural Colorado communities putting tax money into the education system only to see those dollars flow up to the state and then down into the bigger cities. And so they're looking at this kind of data saying, we want to fix this, and if you guys are with us, let's fix this. We've also got construction communities, the pipe fitters. We've got every kind of builder and homeowner. It's a broad, the bankers.
Sure.
It's good. It's a
There's
broad
real
good group.
opportunity to fix it because of the good economy. There's so much more tax money coming back into the system, and that money is available to quote unquote fix it through the legislature.
It's possible. There's something like $1.7 billion coming in. There's a lot of opportunity there.
And that's brand new money.
Brand new money.
Well, so to pivot a little bit, another thing on the ballot here is Proposition 112, which could also potentially have impact on education funding. Now, there was a study released by the State Land Board, and they put together a study saying that if the parameters of Proposition 112 had been instituted in 2014 and had been in effect for the last 2 years, there would be hundreds of millions of dollars lost that would go to K-12 funding because so much of the area available for drilling, so Proposition 112 increases setbacks from 500 feet or 1,000 feet, which is the existing setback, to a hard number of 2,500 feet. And that's not just from occupied buildings, that's from playgrounds, that's from virtually any building, any waterway, which includes intermittent or perennial streams, and areas of special concern. What are those? They have not been defined yet. So as a result of that, we could be experiencing a negative impact for education funding. No on Proposition 112 is also something that you're working on. That's
right. There are direct and indirect impacts to our business. The kind of indirect would be, what we're seeing in all the commercials. There's a $29 billion hit to the Colorado economy, 140,000 jobs lost. The very direct impact to our business is nearly 5 million square feet of office space in our state's urban core is occupied by the oil and gas community.
So what percentage is that? Do you have a sense?
It's a sense of at least 20% of our office market.
1/5 of your office market is occupied by oil and gas and oil and gas related business.
That's right. And what people don't, we complain about traffic, as Coloradans. Our retail markets, we like traffic. And when you start to take away the traffic that's created by that office market, then we lose our retailers. So we've got all these offices above all of these retailers that provide all the services while we're in town doing our work. Again, Colorado lifestyle is at stake. Everybody enjoys those shops.
Well, Peter, we've spent a lot of time talking about Proposition 112.
Yeah, I just thought I'd underscore a few of the comments that both of you made. There's kind of a famous map. I'd be shocked if everybody that's listening doesn't have or hasn't received in the mail the red map.
Right.
And the red map I have in front of me, and it's orange, but the numbers are about 85% of all the private land in the state is not available for future oil and gas development. Now, just think about that. You have all these businesses and 20%, 5 million square feet, and they're faced with a situation where they can't develop in gross 85%. And then you get down to some of the numbers for the areas where the oil and gas actually is, because that's a gross number, but in places like Los Animas County, it's devastating. And that's why both gubernatorial candidates have said this is a bad idea. That's why the Denver Post has said this is a bad idea, because it's a ban.
It might be the only thing that Representative Polis and Secretary Stapleton actually agree on.
And the coalition that Vital for Colorado has put together, we also have tried to put together a coalition, and I don't know what the numbers are, but it's extremely diverse. So this is terrible, and it would directly impact your economic interests and all those people. And what happens to the urban core when those people leave because they can't develop their resources?
Very quickly, Katie.
It's a direct impact to the retail environment, and that's what everybody uses. Doesn't matter what your political affiliation is. I think you got to get behind these. Other industries need to jump in and realize that if they are going to arbitrarily deem oil and gas exploration unhealthy, what else might they come in and decide doesn't belong in Colorado?
It's a potential slippery slope. We'll get into more of this coming up in our second segment. Katie Kruger, CEO of the Denver Metro Commercial Association of Realtors. Peter Moore, the Chairman and CEO of Vital for Colorado. Got a lot more coming up in our second segment. Stay with us. Thank you for staying with us here on Vital for Colorado Radio. I'm your on-air producer, Jon Ekstrom. Joining me, as always, he is an attorney at Robinson Waters and Ordorcio. He is also the chairman and CEO of Vital for Colorado, and someone I'm proud to do this show with twice a month, Peter Moore.
Well, thanks a lot, John. Just to give a brief ad for Vital for Colorado, explaining what it is. I know that, Katie, you've been involved in helping because of what you said, that is so important for every industry sector to help each other because we're all interdependent. And that is the fundamental idea behind Vital for Colorado. We're a 14-person board, many industries, many cities, many chambers of commerce. We're not the oil and gas industry. We're trying to be the voice of business for Colorado. We've been lucky enough after 5 years of effort, really about 4.5 years in terms of building coalition. We have 87,000 Colorado citizens have signed our pledge, over 1,000 businesses. We're doing many, many things, and we're trying to educate and advocate. We're not trying to get to a particular result. We're trying to rely upon science, not hyperbole. We're trying to avoid the various schisms that exist in Colorado, and we're trying to advocate what you were talking about in terms of the Colorado way, and it really is a very special thing that we're trying to preserve. So many things that we're supporting have uniform result or support from people all across the aisle, so we're nonpartisan. And we're working very, very hard in opposing 112, which we think is just wrong for the reasons we spoke about in the last segment.
And potentially catastrophic to the business community here in Denver and across Colorado.
Absolutely. So to find out who we are, please go to our website, which is spelled out vitalforcolorado.com. And you can find out who the board is and who the folks are and all the various things we're working on. And there's a lot of data on 112.
And if you want to sign the pledge for Vital for Colorado, go to vitalforcolorado.com/pledge. We have a 7-principle pledge. You can sign up for our mailing list there, get all sorts of communications about what Vital for Colorado is up to.
Well, thanks, John. Thanks for the opportunity. So we have no on Amendment 73. We have no on Proposition 112. Is there anything that you're in favor of?
Yes, so we have a couple of yeses.
Oh, okay.
And you know, my yard sort of
so
looks
we don't work in the no factor
okay,
here.
It's nice to be balanced. My yard looks like
so.
a little bit of a ballot guide with all the signs I have up, but my somewhat more left of center neighbors get the 2 yes signs that are closer to them, and then my neighbor that's in oil and gas have my 2 no signs that lean a little bit closer to their property line. So I'm very strategic, you know.
It's like a State of the Union address.
It's really.
So back in the 2012 election, just real quickly, we actually had presidential signs for the 2 different parties in our front yard, and they both were stolen all the time.
It's expensive.
They're both stolen, so we had to cut them and replace them, and
Wow.
it was kind of interesting. I guess sign stealing in Greenville Village was a sport back then.
Right. I know they've got to crack down on it. It does get expensive for the campaigns. I know we've got Halloween decorations. We've got a lot going on.
So tell us about Amendment Y and Z.
Amendment Y and Z. We like the end of the alphabet. When we travel and talk about this one, I like to say that for once, this is going to make it so that the voters choose the politicians instead of the politicians choosing the voters. It's 2 amendments that create a new commission and a new criteria for creating the district maps at the congressional and legislative levels. It makes gerrymandering illegal. It gives more voice to more Coloradans. The commercial real estate industry is very much in support of this because we think it brings about better candidates and more competitive elections of these candidates. And we read this as potentially more pro-business candidates, more people that we think are like us.
Right. So you mentioned it makes gerrymandering illegal. How does it do that?
So it's an amazing criteria, and this independent commission is made up of equal parts Republicans, Democrats, and unaffiliated voters. They follow a very strict.
Actually, can I jump in and just ask what gerrymandering is? I have a good sense of it, but I'm not sure that everybody does. It's a great old word, but not a great result.
It's not a great result. Gerrymandering has been going on in the United States, somewhat legally for well over 100 years, and it was the process with which the politicians that were in power would draw the boundaries on a map of to create their districts so that they remain in power.
So that a majority of their supporters are within a given boundary,
That's right.
And it's funny, watching you do this with your hands, as you're drawing it, it's a very sort of amorphous shape. So the districts don't look natural. You go, why would that constitute a district? Geographically, It doesn't make any sense because it's drawn in a very particular way to, for lack of a better term, rig the game.
Well, Colorado has some crazy figures, but if you go to Chicago, it's the wildest there. There are circles with little lines going up, and you have all these special districts that people said, those are the people that will vote for me, those are the people in my district. Well, not in my district now, they're going to be.
Well, so
That's
Peter,
right.
you're saying Chicago may not be on the up and up in terms of elections? Go on. I've never heard of such a thing.
I know, it's
That's
man bites dog. Man bites dog. But in Colorado, I don't want to name the districts, but there are some districts I can think about, and this happens every 10 years as a result of the census.
That's
and then
right.
the game starts again. So we're in 2018, and the game might start again in 2020.
That's right.
And if Y and Z passes, we'll end the game. How?
So the commission will take over crafting these maps, and they will build these maps based on the new criteria, and there will be equal voice of the Republicans, Democrats, and unaffiliated voters. These will also be very open to the public processes. A lot
Transparency.
of
Wow.
sunshine law. A lot of the meetings will be held in the same place every time, so the state will be involved. And then when a map is finally deemed, just about ready, then it has to be approved by a Supreme Court judge. But not just one judge; it has to be approved by a panel of judges, equally Democrat, Republican, and unaffiliated. It's just fair. It's even. Let's see if they can do this. I would say it's hard to mess this up now.
Well, okay, so the way you've described this, it's hard to imagine anyone being against this. What are the arguments against this?
Well, the lawyers that every 10 years get involved in gerrymandering cases.
And you know a thing or two about lawyering.
And I even know who the people are, but I suppose they're not really against it because each of the lawyers, I think, is trying to have a fair result. This is a much better process.
It's a much better process, and if Kent Theory was here, he's the chair of this Y&Z,
the CEO of DaVita.
The CEO of DaVita, and he chairs Fair Maps, the campaign in charge here. He has an amazing story of kind of opposing sides coming together, sort of rattling sabers, but meeting and building this. Talk about the Colorado way. This is a Colorado proud ballot item. I think it's the most feel-good item that you're going to vote yes for. And we got to reach that 55%. So,
wow.
So what kind of coalition do you have to support Y&Z? It's a fairly broad coalition, I think.
It's so broad that just about every legislator on either side have jumped in and given support. Enormous broad range of businesses have jumped in. We actually paused to have a photograph taken of I think it was Grantham and Crescenta together.
Oh my.
Give it. Everybody, wait a minute. Everybody's smiling here. Let's take a photograph. I think everybody is really looking for this to go forward and change Colorado. It's going to make us an example of one of the best written pieces for fair maps in the country. So go Colorado.
So it's very high standard under the new constitutional change. It's 55% for new initiatives. It's 2% in the 35 senatorial districts. And
Well, that's for signature gathering.
That's for signature gathering.
That's not
okay.
in terms of passing it.
Okay.
But that is in terms of to get it on the ballot. But for passage, it has to be 55%, thanks to Amendment 71.
Well, thank you, John. I forgot that detail, but I recalled the 55 and 2. But
well, if you've ever seen Pardon the Interruption, I'm like Stat Boy.
Stat Boy, I like that. So the task here is really to publicize it.
That's right.
Because almost everybody's in favor of it on both sides of the aisle, and we have very, very unique bipartisan support for yes on Y&Z.
Right, but
I mean,
Coloradans
I can't think of anything the bipartisan support that you've just described in recent years.
Our biggest battle is that Coloradans are naturally conservative about changing the Constitution, and so the gravity of the ballot would normally, sort of make it a little bit more difficult for people to say yes to something new. And now with with Colorado Raise the Bar, we've got to hit that 55%.
Yeah.
That is the challenge of the Fair Maps campaign.
Well, and especially with something like ballot fatigue. There is so much on this ballot that people start going through, and eventually there's a theory that says, okay, I don't want to read all this, and so there is so much here, I'm just going to vote no, because change is scary and potentially dangerous, and as we've talked about with things like 73 and 112, there are unintended consequences, and I think as people go on, they say, I don't know necessarily what this is all going to do, but I know the way things are now, and that might be preferable to... It's like the devil you know versus the devil you don't.
That's exactly it.
I think that's
you're
what
not alone.
Yeah.
Those are the voters.
Right. So something else that you are a yes on in terms of DEMCAR, that is Proposition 110. And I think that might surprise people because we have talked about the economic consequences or potential increases in taxes, things like that for 73 and 112. But Proposition 110, describe what it is, and then please describe why your organization is in favor of it.
Proposition 110 is promoted by a campaign called Let's Go Colorado. It's a 0.62% sales tax that generates $767 million the first year and then leverages billions of dollars in bonds. It's a dedicated funding stream for transportation, with about half of the monies going towards long-standing CDOT projects, the other half going to the local level for them to decide if they, whatever they need. It's something that DEMCAR supports very actively because it's one of our best ways to thwart no-growth initiatives. And it helps us deal with congestion, and it helps us be competitive against our Rocky Mountain West states. For attracting new business, we've got to invest in our roads. So.
Well, you mentioned no-growth initiatives. We've seen that in places like Lakewood and Golden and some other suburban communities. Some people want to bring that model to Denver or maybe to the state or to the entire Front Range. How does this thwart no-growth initiatives?
Congestion continues to be the biggest issue that polls as why somebody might vote in favor of a no-growth initiative. And so we think getting ahead of congestion, travel time to work, as housing gets more expensive, our commutes are getting longer, getting ahead of how people get to work and how they get the things they need is one of the best ways that we can keep no growth off the ballot.
Interesting. And
this is really kind of interesting to me because we're talking about a very small tax increase. It's a sales tax increase, and that's very, very broadly based. It's everybody. It's 0.62, less than 1%. The last one we talked about, no, on 73, was a 78% tax increase on small businesses.
That's right.
It's wild to think about those two numbers. Then as it relates to your constituency, you represent a lot of retail. And the taxes are a pass-through, and they collect it from the consumers, but it ultimately affects sales. And one might naturally think that retailers would not want to have a tax increase on retail because it would reduce the number of sales. But here you have retailers thinking for the future and thinking about what's really important here. What's important here is to create new money and new funds to fix the transportation problem or start the process of fixing the transportation problem. It's very forward-looking. It really is. It
ends up coming out to something like 1 cent on a dollar, and so that's a lot easier to digest than a 78% tax increase for education. And the coalition building process took years, and everyone was involved. And you got to give a lot to Kelly Bruff at the chamber for just going through what she did to get everybody at the table and hear it all. I think when you do that kind of a drum roll, we get the buy-in to get it done.
Kelly was one of our founding board members for Vital for Colorado.
I heard that.
Back to 2014. So I served on the board with her for a couple of years. Talk about the coalition. It's the same kind of question. We talked about Y and Z, and you talked to people across the aisle. What kind of coalition is supporting Proposition 110?
Yes, I think, it might be surprising to see that almost every kind of business involved, even, people that maybe don't have high traffic clientele coming in their front door so insurers, insurance companies, and the construction industry, and all of these groups that want to keep the roadways open to their product. So, and we even have a lot of very small businesses, everything from small law firms to nail salon owners to the people that run major sectors of the concessions out at the airport. It's broad, and
Wow.
the drum roll has been going for years. They did it right. They took time to hear from everybody, and I think when they were planning on what goes to CDOT, what goes to the local level, what might be multimodal, they had to get everybody at the table.
Sure. And this is not constitutional, so this one does not require 55%.
That's right, and it also times out at 20 years. So that's one of the things that helps our business that's usually tax adverse to say, listen, there's a timeout. It doesn't go on forever.
Yeah, it's not in perpetuity.
That's right. This is to fix a problem, to get us caught up, and then we'll look and see what does Colorado need in 20 years. So we like it.
One element that you mentioned very briefly, well, there are two elements. We're bringing new money in through the bonding of a fairly significant level, and then a major portion of that, as I understand it, is going to be under the control of local governments who know all throughout the state what their needs are. And so it's kind of a unique combination, is that we finally have a proposal and a method that the retailers support, who are normally tax adverse, to bring new money in, and 45% goes to local government. That is really unique thinking and good planning, and that's probably why you have such broad coalition.
Right, they asked for it, and the other thing that they were contending with at the top of the coalition is just, some people want sidewalks, some people want lanes widened, some people definitely don't want lanes widened, so it lets them figure it out.
Right.
So, and figure it out over time. 20 years is a long time. Look at how Colorado's growing, so.
Well, I mean, I'm a native here, and so I think back to when Colorado, and Denver in particular, was not cool. It was not like a place that was a destination. It was just another stop in flyover country, just a more further west outpost of, say, Cincinnati or Indianapolis or Kansas City. It was just another one of those cities. And now all of a sudden we're a destination, and we have, while we're not a major city, we are starting to get the problems of a major city, and this is something that I think can address many of those issues that come with attendant growth.
That's right, we think so too.
So one other thing that we should talk about here, this is Denver specific, I believe, and it is Referred Measure 2B. And describe for me what that is. This strikes me as another good government initiative, similar to Amendments Y and Z.
Right. I think of this one, I think of 2B as a little bit of housekeeping, a little cleanup as Denver becomes a major Tier 1 city. In the past, the number of signatures required to get a citizens initiative on the ballot, or in the past currently, has been based on the mayoral election turnout. And as you can imagine, that makes a very volatile signature count number. Some of these races are very highly contested. Some of them are boring. We know who we're going to vote for. These numbers bounce up and down and go all over the place. We are proposing that it switches to the signature count being based on 2% of the active registered voters. Puts us kind of more in step with other major municipal areas, makes that number less volatile. And I think DEMCAR believes that it gives more voice to more people, makes sure that these citizens initiatives, they have to do the work of getting broad voice of the Denver community before they bring something to the ballot. Otherwise, what ends up happening is they get kind of one side of the argument. If they get 4,700 signatures, they plop it on the ballot, it passes by the hair of its chinny chin chin, and then we all spend taxpayer money taking it apart and making it implementable because they haven't gotten enough voice. Sometimes they want to skirt around maybe getting business community voice, and they realize, oh shoot, it's not implementable. So,
is there an example of something that the commercial real estate industry has dealt with that is as a result of this previous process that you just described?
Yeah, so about a year ago, the Green Roof Initiative came through Denver that required all commercial buildings of 25,000 square feet or more to have a rooftop garden. I mean, as you can imagine, we've got 100-year-old buildings that can't bear the weight of rooftop gardens. There's structural issues there. You can't have water up there. Any owner, there's so many. It's a $15 million add to the expansion of the Denver, the Sewell Ballroom in the Denver Performing Arts Complex area. Huge issues came out of this. And they only needed 4,700 signatures, which we know they got kind of by the line to the bathroom at one of the Botanic Gardens concerts. And they got it on the ballot. It passed by the skin of its teeth. And then we had to take it all apart in a coalition and task force meeting that was funded by taxpayers in the city in order to figure out how we could actually have this work to reduce the heat island, which was the intent of the voters, not completely crush the economy, and honestly just help the proponents get what they really wanted. It was an impossibility, and I think, with having it be 2% of the active registered voter turnout, that moves that signature count to something like 9,000. Brandon Rietheimer, the proponent, who we're friends now, the process brought us close together. He would have had to go out there and get dirty, and that's why I like, he would have had to get input from both sides, is what I mean by that. And that's what I like about some of these issues that we've talked about earlier that we're yeses on, is they got dirty, they did the years-long work, and now it's going to be right for Colorado. So I like this one. So we're a definite yes on 2B.
So it's a measure against potential future unintended consequences. By doing the work that you described, instead of at taxpayer expense, you were doing it almost, you're building a coalition beforehand that doesn't take money out of taxpayers' hands and achieves what you want to achieve in a way that is more practicable. Is that fair to say?
That's right. It's sort of, in my mind, forcing the coalition building.
I see a direct relationship between this and Y and Z. Let's try to improve the process and try to reduce the political games. And the idea that you can, in its original form, I don't know if the number was 4,800, you could have 4,800 people at an event sign something. Next thing you know, it's on the ballot and has tens of millions of dollars of impact for potentially a silver result.
That's right.
That's a bad thing.
It's a bad thing. It would have been devastating in its initial form to have the Green Roof Initiative pass and be burdened. The commercial real estate owners bear the burden of that. I mean, we're talking about, something like a $2 or $3 million roof requirement and how that impacts these office spaces lease rates, right?
Right. And so when you say, people, especially in this climate, may not have a lot of sympathy for people who, say, own commercial real estate, right? But the impact of that, it's not just them. That has to do with the affordability of people who want to do business in Denver. And you mentioned everyone, who occupy these buildings, from small law firms to small insurance agencies to nail salons. That's where the impact is actually going to be felt, not with people who own the buildings. It's to the people further down the chain.
Every single dollar gets passed through as a common area maintenance expense, CAM.
That's right. Some of the solutions they've come up with for the green roof is, hey, you can plant greenery anywhere. That helps with the heat island. You can put a white roof on your building. You could build it from the start, LEED certified. All of these things are more affordable, better for all of us, and you're not going to see your dry cleaning bill and your nail salon bill go up when you stop on your way home.
There
so
you go.
Better.
Katie Kruger, tell us where we can learn more about DEMCAR. Give us the website where we can find you. Any other thing you'd like to plug, please do it now in our remaining time.
Sure. You can find us at DEMCAR.com. That's DMCAR.com. We represent 2,000 commercial real estate owners and brokers in a $12.6 billion industry.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Just to summarize the show, no on Amendment 73 coming up. The ballot's coming no on Proposition 112, yes on Amendment Y and Z, yes on Proposition 110, and if you live in Denver, yes on Referred Measure 2B.
And if you'd like to learn more from this show, it is available on Vital for Colorado's website. That is www.vitalforcolorado.com. You can find this show along with every show that we've done under the Learn tab. Go to Videos and Podcasts. You'll find this episode with Katie Kruger, as well as all of our past guests. Peter Moore, this was an enormous pleasure as always. Chairman and CEO of Vital for Colorado.
Thanks for having me. It's a lot of fun.
And thank you very much for listening. We'll catch you again very, very soon.